Hey, where do you take shape? Thoughts find have an every conversation explores the art of thinking beyond the obvious. And today I have my special guest. He's a fellow podcaster as well as an author and the author of the book The Sprinkle Effect, no other than Miss Debbie Weiss.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to have a conversation with
Welcome, Miss Debbie. And can you please introduce more about yourself that I miss?
you. Well, I am 62 years old and I became an author about 2.5 years ago, something that I never ever dreamt of. And
Mm-hmm.
so through life, I basically around 50 had an awakening that said, my life is okay, but I feel like there's more. And I didn't know what it was, but eventually it led me to writing a couple of books.
Yes, and thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world, Miss Debbie, through your books. Thank you. And let's talk about the sprinkle effect. What was the origin of the sprinkle effect metaphor?
So it started because my first book was my memoir, which just was a compilation of stories together told an inspirational story. But there was no advice or, try this, do that kind of thing. And so people were asking for that. Well, what did you do after? For me, it was an aha moment at 50.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where the sprinkle effect came into play. And the whole idea of the sprinkle effect is that one sprinkle at a time, you can change your life. And so the sprinkles are things like mindset, belief, dreams, curiosity, those type of things. And so there's something just for me about sprinkles, rainbow sprinkles, the visual. It just makes me feel happy and alive and kind of reminds me of that feeling that you get or you had when you were a child with a world of possibility, in front of you.
Yes, a world of possibility indeed. This book feels like it emerged from a personal philosophy. What is the turning point that made you decide your approach to life was something you needed to systematize that shared with the world?
So I became a family caregiver when I was 17. It started when my father had a massive stroke, and thankfully he survived, but he was permanently disabled. He was only 46, and my parents divorced. And so for the next 30 years, I was my dad's caregiver. And then when my oldest son was 2, he was diagnosed on the autism spectrum, added a series of diagnoses since that time. And later on in life, uh, I became a caregiver to my husband, but that after I kind of had an aha moment. So when I turned 50 for me, that felt big. Just the idea that I was 50 and I was living this life. I mean, I had so many good things and things to be grateful for, but I wasn't really feeling that way. I was feeling overwhelmed and burdened. And why is this all happening to me? Because my whole life, my whole adult life, I had been caring for other people and working, and I have a small insurance agency, so I have my team members to worry about and my customers to worry about, and I was giving and going a million miles a minute. And when I turned 50, my friends insisted that we go away for a weekend to celebrate, just a girls' weekend. And in that weekend, I experienced what it felt like to have no other responsibilities, to have nobody else to answer to other than yourself. I discovered that I really had no idea who I was as a person. And the idea that 50 years went so quickly, the next 50 will be here before I know it. And I didn't want to be that person looking back on their life with regrets because things maybe I didn't try. And I had nothing in particular, by the way, that I, always wanted to do. I didn't have anything in mind, but I just knew that this is our one and only life. And I've got to start to figure out what I want mine to look like. And so for me, 50 was the turning point.
Definitely. Life begins at 50 now, people. So, how do you define a colorful and fulfilling life in the context of the book? Is it about joy, passion, peace, or unique combination of elements?
Oh, definitely a combination of everything. The difference of getting up every day, having that groundhog day thing. I get up, I take a shower, I go to work, I come home. Now here in the Northeast, it's dark before I even leave work. It's depressing. I gotta, come home and if you make dinner or eat dinner or whatever it is, and so many of us then plop on the couch and watch TV or scroll on our phones and get up and do it again. And it's not like anything is, sometimes people, obviously there's days where we all get up and we don't feel like taking any of our responsibilities on that day.
Mhm.
But a colorful and fulfilling life is what I discovered when I started to explore what I wanted, when I started to open my mind to different ideas and possibilities and actually believe. And so now every day when I wake up, I'm excited for the day because there are typically things on my calendar that light me up, just like this podcast. What better thing to do first thing in the morning? It sets the tone for the day. I'm excited. And yes, I'll go to my insurance office and that'll be different, but it's still it's not that groundhog day. There's always something that you're looking forward to. And in this case, being an entrepreneur and an author, what's the next thing that I'm creating, that I'm striving for? And it's exciting instead of just going to your job, checking a box, collecting your paycheck, and doing the same thing again tomorrow and wishing for the weekend.
Mm, yes. And Miss Debbie, if someone is living a monochrome life, what is the very first smallest sprinkle you recommend to start seeing a chef?
There are so many, but for me, I remember that I had been listening to a podcast and the host said something, it was about a mindset podcast. And the host said something like, write down exactly what you want your dream day to look like. Everything, where you're living, what it looks like, what it smells like, who you're with, what are you doing, like in detail. And I thought to myself, I have no idea. I have no idea what my dream day is like.
Mm,
And I think that because of that, I was, to use that analogy, kind of just drifting in off to sea wherever the waves took me. That's where I went. If there was something, a fire to be put out at work or at home or with one of my loved ones' health, I was just doing it. I was reacting. The
mm-hmm,
difference is, now once I figure out, okay, here's what I think my dream life is, and that could change my dream day. I know where I am now. At least then I can start to figure out, and I still don't know, by the way. So it's not an even line, but I can figure out how do I get from where I am now, point A, to what my dream day looks like, point B, and kind of work backwards and just take one step. Whatever that is, it could be making a phone call. It could be, you know, um, writing an email. It could be reading a book or listening to a podcast, like just something a little bit different that's going to start you moving in a different direction, a new direction. Doesn't mean you have to give up your career, your family, none of that. You decide what you want it to look like.
Yes, you decide. You are the captain of your own soul, as they said. Given the book's theme, Miss Debbie, was your writing process itself a sprinkled experience? Did you have a rituals or practices to make an act of writing feel colorful and fulfilling, especially on a difficult days?
Yeah, it is definitely not an easy process. It was much more difficult to write my first book because I had never written a book, and that's not where my background is and where I felt my strength lied, and I just had no idea what to do. So once I had that under my belt, coming into the sprinkle effect was a little bit different because I saw the first book that I wrote, I was very intentional in making sure to write, I don't want to say 7 days a week, let's say 5 to 6 days a week. And it didn't mean that it was going to happen at the same time, but every day I would schedule in, here's what I'm going to sit down on my computer and write. And some days it wouldn't be fun. It would
Hmm.
be torture. You're sitting there, you're staring at the screen, you write a couple sentences, you're thinking to yourself, nah, that's not the direction I want to go in, and you feel after an hour you have nothing to show for it. And then there's other days where you show up and it just flows. And once you accept that that's the process, then you don't become as frustrated those days where you're just staring blankly at the screen thinking, where do I even begin? And as you see those words come onto the page, it's just kind of like the sprinkles. Once you start taking those little steps, it's that domino effect. Oh, look, I actually wrote one chapter. I think I could write another. And maybe it's not as big as writing a chapter. I actually sat there and wrote something for 20 minutes. Even if you wind up throwing it in the garbage afterwards, it doesn't matter. You're taking a step in the right direction. But it does definitely, for me, take discipline and planning.
Discipline and planning, for sure. So, how did you approach the structure of the book? Was it a challenge to organize what might feel like many small sprinkles into a cohesive and progressive roadmap for the reader?
It's difficult to think what sprinkles do I want to talk about because there's so many different things. What order should they come in? And then, quite honestly, in each of the chapters, there's 15 particular sprinkles, and there's kind of like bigger sprinkles in the intro and the conclusion. So let's say 17. That for each one, I had a personal story. And so it just didn't come to me. It took some time to figure out, well, here's the messages I want to convey. Here's a story that I have, a personal experience related to that sprinkle. But I'll tell you, some of them were hard, to figure out, does this make sense? Does this make sense in this order? But in the end, in my intro, I write, you know what? This is the kind of book that you use as you see fit. Read it cover to cover, or when you sit down to read, maybe that day you just needed a little bit of a sprinkle of adaptability. It's time to pivot your don't want to, and maybe you need to hear that message. And so just read the little sprinkle of adaptability that day and be on your way. You have to use it as you see fit, but my goal was not to have it be a book that you read from cover to cover, put on your shelf, and never pick it up again. It's there to take whatever sprinkle or sprinkles you need in the moment.
Yes. And Miss Debbie, writing a book about fulfillment requires a certain vulnerability. Was it that difficult to share your own journey toward a more colorful life, including the times you may have felt stuck?
Yeah. And times I was stuck, and vulnerable times maybe of decisions or situations that I got myself into that I wasn't proud of. And when I say that, I'm specifically thinking about a money situation that I got myself into. And I was embarrassed by it. My friends and family didn't know. It was something that I was living with all on my own. And I was scared out of my mind to share that, afraid what people would think of me. And then I realized, the whole point of writing these kind of books is to share your own journey so people can see themselves in that. And so I thought, if I am remiss and do not share this money story, I lose the whole point, because I want people to know, if they're where I was or something similar, there's hope. There is a way out of it, even though it might feel like in the moment there is not. But there always is. And so being vulnerable like that with some of these stories was difficult, because you're telling your inner secrets to the world, and it's scary.
Yes, definitely. And Miss Debbie, which chapter or section was the most challenging to write and why? Was it
Mm,
because it was personally resonant or technically difficult or emotionally taxing?
mm. That's a good question. I'd have to honestly take a look at my sprinkles and my story. I don't recall any one being very difficult over the others. I think it
Mm-hmm.
was just really more when you sit down to write that chapter. Maybe it was just, I think the most difficult thing for me was figuring out how to describe the sprinkle in a way that maybe somebody never thought about it before, because we've all heard of these words, right? We've all know what perception and resilience and curiosity, like, we know what it means. It's not like it's some crazy new concept that I'm delivering. It's just looking at it in a different way. And so I think it was harder to write about what is curiosity, what does that mean to you, versus what I did when I was curious, if that makes sense.
Makes sense, Miss Debbie. A common pitfall of self help is making readers feel overwhelmed by too many ideas. How did you consciously design the book to feel like an invitation rather than a demand to do list?
Yes, for sure. And I agree with you. It's light. I write the same way I talk. So it's very easy reading. And I've gotten a lot of feedback that someone says, I feel like I'm talking to my friend. I feel like I'm talking to my sister, which is exactly what I want you to feel like. We're just having a conversation. And the chapters aren't long, and it's not too much to take in the idea. I think it's really more to remind you of the idea, and to realize that you can consciously bring more of whatever that sprinkle is into your life. Now, at the end of each chapter, there are 3 activities and a journal prompt. And I do also write in the introduction that I think that filling out those, answering those questions, doing those activities are as change won't happen unless you look inside. Just by reading the words, by relating to my story, you might think, oh, yeah, that's nice. But you're not really tapping in. The whole idea isn't just to be entertaining, it's to learn something about yourself. And the only way that you do that is by taking the time to, do the exercises. And I know myself in the past, anytime I read a book that has those kind of activities, I gloss right over them, right? I don't have time. That's ridiculous. I want to read the next chapter and the next chapter and the next chapter. And if that's you and that's the only way you can do it, that's fine. But go back and do them, not all at the same time. Don't make it overwhelming, because you won't. But I'm telling you, if you sit down with pen and paper and really tap into what's going on in your own mind and writing it down, that's where the real magic happens. So you, the reader, have to make it happen. It's not me.
Hmm. Yes, definitely. The idea of color, Miss Debbie, feels visual. Did you work with the visuals, illustrations, or specific language techniques to paint a picture in the reader's mind?
I, in each chapter, each sprinkle has an associated color. So that the idea is, you courage, the sprinkle of courage is red, and a sprinkle of perspective is blue, and joy is yellow, and so on and so forth. And together in your mind, I want you thinking of like, oh, I'm kind of creating that rainbow effect by putting in my jar a sprinkle of mindset, a sprinkle of vision or direction, joy, whatever it is. And so I like the idea that was my visual. And if, when looking at the cover, you can see that, you know, pretty much that's my visual, just those rainbow sprinkles that just make me smile.
Miss Debbie, what is the most significant sprinkle you added to your own life during the process of writing this book?
Mindset for sure.
Hmm.
I think that's where it all starts because it's would have been so easy to say, I don't even know. I guess I was 60 when I wrote it. So it's so easy to say, I'm 60 years old. Really? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm supposed to be, theoretically slowing down or um, not learning a new profession, stepping out of my comfort zone.
Hmm.
And, you know, the other side of your comfort zone is where all the growth and all the color comes in and the fulfillment.
Yes. Definitely. Fulfillment indeed. And how did the act of writing the sprinkle effect change your own definition of fulfilling life? Did you discover anything new about the concept through the process of articulating if for others?
I discovered things about myself I never knew, right? One
Mm-hmm.
is the fact that I can do this. I never felt that I had a ounce of creativity in my bones. I used to say anything that came up, whatever it was, I'd be like, nope, I don't do that. I'm not creative. I don't have a creative bone in my body. That's all I used to say. But you know what? That's not true because I had this vision of the sprinkles. I had this vision of, what the cover was going to look like. I had this vision of each spring. I had so much already in my mind. Well, that's creativity. We all have that. And so I think by writing, by going through the process, one, I discovered anything I set my mind to, I can accomplish. And two, I don't know until I came up with the concept that I really realized looking back how since the age of 50 I have changed my life. And so coming up with the metaphor of, oh, just doing these small little things. Oh, how about sprinkles? And you
Mm-hmm.
feel it, you feel it in your body when it's a heck yes. That is what it is. That is me. And that's the message I want to share.
All creatives face burnout. Miss Debbie, what did you do to replenish your own sprinkle jar when you left your creativity or energy was depleted during the long process of writing?
Sometimes you might have to step away from the computer if you just, for whatever reason, nothing is happening. Sometimes you sit there long enough and things will come to you. So it's a little bit of a dance there.
Mm,
I think that gosh. it's just such a feeling of accomplishment. I'm trying to think what I would do. You know what? I would either meditate or I would do some breath work. And there was a particular kind of breath work, and really I don't do it anymore, and I often think to myself, why not? This was so helpful. That helped me, and I would seem to all of a sudden like get it would help get the creative juices flowing. Or go outside and take a walk, just step away and remove yourself and do something else to, get those juices flowing.
Mm, yes. Definitely let the juice flowing and share to the world. Miss Debbie, what is the single biggest shift you hope happens for a reader between the moment they open the first page and the moment they close the final one?
I hope they believe it's possible that anyone, regardless of your age, regardless of difficult circumstances that you might be dealing with now, you have the ability to make your life more colorful and fulfilling. But it comes down to you, right? And I think that that's the message. You're not, you don't have to wait for someone else to do something, to get the right job, to have enough money to move to where you want to live. Those are things. They're not going to make your life more colorful and fulfilling in the long run. But
Y-
what you do with yourself, how you navigate your life, that is where the fulfillment and the color comes in. And so my hope is that anyone who reads the book feels that, hey, I can do this. I can make a change in my life.
Hmm. Miss Debbie, before we wrap up our discussion for today, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, people. My other podcast, because my abstract essay is already in fifth season, abstract poetry in second season, and my book 101 review in fifth season too, a comedy 101 third season, and my food 101 in fifth season as well. Geography, love letters, movie 101 review, music 101 our fourth season. Science 101, Sex 101 in second season, Law 101, Mental Health and Bible Verses are my baby podcast. Please listen to them wherever you listen your podcast. So, Miss Debbie, if your readers truly embody this philosophy, what kind of collective effect do you hope to see in their lives?
I think I want to see that they're in control, they feel in control, which feels good, it's empowering, and that they're now living their lives for themselves. Not doesn't mean that you shouldn't care and worry about other people and all the things, but just the fact that the rest of their lives are in their own hands, and they're ready to set sail.
They're ready to set sails and looking forward for the voyage. And Miss Debbie Weiss, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. So, can you please invite our listeners to support your the sprinkle effect or whatever you want to promote on Abstract Essay?
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for having me. um, DebbieRWeiss.com. You have to put in the R. Visit my website. You can see my books. I just came out with the Sprinkle Effect card deck to quickly help bring a sprinkle into your life each and every day. And it's something I'm very, very excited about. So you can find me on DebbieRWeiss.com, and then you can find all my social media. And my podcast is Maybe I Can with Debbie Weiss.
Yes, people, let's support Miss Debbie Weiss because if you support her for sure, more and more empowering books like this to come, more and more empowering episodes of the podcast itself. So, Miss Debbie, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Daniel.
Modicum people, see you soon.